Appreciate it. We're going to start right in the front with Aaron Beard. Wait for the microphone, please.
This is for Commissioner Swarbrick. There's been a lot of discussion over the years about the importance of full membership to the ACC. So I guess how tough of a decision was it to sort of, I guess, go against that tradition, I guess?
Well, in the end, I don't know that it was tough, but I do think it's certainly significant, Aaron, in the sense that we are in our 60th year as a conference, and we have always been an all-in, if you will, membership. And in more recent years, we've discussed this with a changing landscape out there in intercollegiate athletics, a changing world. And Jim Barker, I think, said it best in one of our discussions about this and talking about that change. What was best 20 years ago isn't necessarily best in today's world. And we talked about crossing that threshold and took that very seriously in our discussions. And as I said, this was not the first time we've had those discussions. So I think that transition in thinking evolved over a period of time. I had a number of conversations with Gene Corrigan, my predecessor, about that, and whom I have great respect for. And of course, Gene has the distinction of having been the athletic director at Notre Dame as well as the commissioner of the Atlantic Coast Conference. And so I think it just came through our internal discussions as now's the time, and this is a partnership that is a win-win and good for both parties, and the time had come to cross that threshold.
If I could just kind of piggyback on that. The University of Notre Dame has an identity that was formed over a long period from the days of Rockby. We have more fans in Massachusetts and New York and Ohio and Indiana. We're proud to be in Indiana. We didn't feel we could give that up without losing our identity in some way. And we're just deeply grateful to the ACC, who have been such great partners in recognizing that. But I just want to say emphatically and clearly, that aside, we're all in the ACC. We're committed to this conference for athletic purposes, but even more deeply, as Nathan Hatch articulated, for the affinity of institutions and the affinity of values that exist. So on behalf of Notre Dame, I want everyone to understand we're deeply committed to the ACC.
Go next to Ed.
John, one of the main issues of the all-in situation is the television contracts and various agreements that are obviously going to go through a certain year. Do you revisit it in 2015 or 16, both in terms of television contracts and Notre Dame possibly ever coming in as a football member?
In terms of the television contracts, yes, we will revisit that. We've had some preliminary conversations with our television partners that would be prudent to do so. We do think that this arrangement will enhance our television product and has value with our television product. Notre Dame obviously will remain with their television contractual agreements for football and for hockey, but in all other sports will be a full participant in the Atlantic Coast Conference from a TV standpoint. They will keep their football television revenue. The ACC will keep its television revenue. We'll be playing in football 5 games every season. Rotating 1 year, 3 would be ACC home games, 2 would be Notre Dame home games, then reversing that the following year. So that will come into play. I don't know. We will finalize that as we move forward, with our discussions with our television partner.
We're going to go to Joe.
Joe Gilliam, the Business Observer here in Raleigh. John, Is there a timetable for this? Obviously, you got Pitt and Syracuse coming in next year, and then as long as Notre Dame's not a full football member, is there a need to add a 16th team to the league?
There is no need to add a 16th team to the league, and there's no intention of doing so. In fact, from a practical standpoint, it really is illogical. And by that I mean, we'll be 15 members. In basketball, we'll have a 15-team playing lineup. We're not in divisions in basketball. In football, we'll be 14 with 2 even divisions. Obviously, if we brought a 16th member in, then that causes an imbalance in our football divisions. So we will be a 15-team league. Timetable is really up to Notre Dame and the Big East Conference. As we said and did with Syracuse and Pitt, we'll respect whatever is appropriate in terms of Notre Dame's departure from the Big East, and we will welcome them as soon as they're able to join us.
Yeah, the timetable is a few years out. Mr. Jack.
Well, it'd be under the current arrangement, would be the 15-16 season. But we'll meet our obligations to the Big East and have discussions about whether there's any opportunity to accelerate that.
Come next to Jim.
You mentioned about being all in. Does the new exit fee, does that apply to Notre Dame, and when does that go into effect?
It does apply to Notre Dame, and it goes into effect immediately.
Kevin Conley, Fox 8 in Greensboro. John, is there a framework in place for them to join in football in terms of like a trigger? Like if the BCS changes the playoff format, is that a trigger that is sort of automatically will have set up where Notre Dame will join in football?
Kevin, I'm sorry, I was trying to find you and I didn't hear the entirety of the question. Do you mind asking it again?
Is there a trigger or a framework in place of, like, if the BCS changes, if the college football playoff ever expands, that Notre Dame will automatically join in football?
No, there is not. I think what you've heard from Notre Dame is that they would assess their situation once the postseason football was clearer, and that's what Jack and I spent a lot of time together trying to do over the last 6 months or so with the help of a lot of other people. And now that is clear, I think that gave some definition to Notre Dame's future vision and the decisions they would want to make. But the answer to your question simply is no, there is no such thing.
Time for just a couple more.
Mark Armstrong with ABC 11 here in Raleigh-Durham as well. For Father Jenkins and Mr. Swarbrick, you're popular guys with other conferences too. Did this ever come close to fruition with another conference?
I'll let Jack speak. I don't think there's out there a better situation than the situation we have. As I said, the ACC has allowed us to retain a tradition that's so central to our identity in football, while we're joining a conference that athletically, as well as academically, fits Notre Dame perfectly. I just don't think there's a better option out there than the situation we have. It wasn't a tough decision.
This is, I guess, for Jack. It is our chance to get away from Vilcom and interact with the media. The time frame is still out there, but have there been discussions about the distribution and how it'll differ between Notre Dame and the other schools not being a football member? And I guess it's for John as well.
The distribution being the
Full
revenue distribution?
revenue distribution, yeah.
Well, as John indicated, we'll keep the revenue associated with our our football and hockey broadcast agreements. We will otherwise have a member share of the non-football element of the ACCs. And for participation purposes, whether it's the NCAA basketball tournament or something else, will be like any other member.
How much less would it be than the full distribution for each school? Is that been determined?
Well, as I mentioned, in terms of football television revenues, the ACC stays in the ACC among the 12, soon to be 14 schools. And Notre Dame keeps their football revenue through NBC. When games are in South Bend or at a neutral site that is a Notre Dame home game, then that's theirs. When a game is in an ACC stadium or a neutral site that we are hosting, then ESPN, because of our contractual arrangement with them, would have access to televise those games, and the revenue would remain in the ACC. In terms of basketball, basically the way this will work is that there will now be 15 chairs. By agreement, we designate 80% of our television revenues to football, 20% to basketball. So Notre Dame will receive 1/15 of 20% for their basketball participation and Olympic sport participation.
We have 3 more questions and that's it.
Hi, from the Duke Chronicle. I was wondering if you think the arrangement with Notre Dame in football potentially paves the way for other schools to negotiate their own revenue deals in other sports, such as Duke and North Carolina in basketball?
Do not.
Looking to the future, how big is the hurdle for Notre Dame the financial hurdle for Notre Dame to be able to come into the ACC without suffering a financial penalty? How much does Notre Dame receive annually right now for its football rights? And what is the revenue per school for the football rights in the ACC? And while I have the mic, how will this affect the tournament schedule for basketball? How will that be lined up?
I can't speak to the first part of the question.
Yeah, relative to the first part, I'd just say this wasn't a financial decision. It's financially neutral for us, and we don't foresee that changing anytime in the future.
In terms of us, we'll be in discussions with our television partner because there's some games of value that will be added to our inventory there. And so I think there will be some enhancement to that. We'll have to wait and see exactly what that will be. Obviously, we feel positively about that in terms of our analysis, and as I said earlier, how we look at that and evaluate it going forward. And in terms of the tournament, we're looking at with 14 members, we were looking at how to do the basketball tournament. It will require Wednesday games, and would have been 2. Now there will be 3. And in all likelihood, the top 4 seeds will receive byes.
John, how will the contract bowl, the Orange Bowl, be affected by this? And is there a scenario where the ACC would be playing against Notre Dame in such a bowl?
Good question. The way the bowl situation will work, and I think this is something very positive for both of us, another win-win. That's a part of the bigger picture win-win. The Notre Dame, and we're not through with the discussions on this, but in all probability, Notre Dame will be one of multiple potential participants on the opponent side of the Orange Bowl. The ACC will keep all of its Orange Bowl revenues. That's a contract game that comes straight to the ACC. It does not go into the BCS revenue sharing pot, so to speak. And the team that plays us has the same situation on the other side. So there is the possibility of an ACC Notre Dame Orange Bowl in addition to the 5 per season ACC Notre Dame football games. Notre Dame would keep all of any revenues that it generated from playing in any one of the other 5 BCS games. The ACC would keep its revenues from those games that go into the sharing pot, actually. Below the BCS, Notre Dame will be a part of the ACC Bowl lineup. And in that sense, will basically become an ACC team in our bowl structure and bowl lineup. There will be a provision in which for Notre Dame to be selected over an ACC team at the point of selection, another eligible ACC team, that Notre Dame would have to be ranked higher, equal to, or in the win column, be within 1 win of any ACC teams that are also eligible to be picked. So if an ACC team were 10-2 and Notre Dame were 8-4, they cannot be selected for that particular bowl at that point of selection. But if they had 9 wins, they would be eligible for the bowl picking to take Notre Dame.
Last question from Andrew.
John, how much do you think this just solidifies the ACC in terms of, quashing rumors that other schools might be interested in leaving?
Well, I think when you consider Notre Dame coming into the league and the attractiveness of that and the excitement that our schools have for that and what it brings tangibly as well as optically, and you combine that with what our presidents have done in terms of the exit fee, I don't know why there would be any rumors.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being with us.